Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Jed McKay's Strange, where we had seen Clea in her pursuit to bring back the deceased Doctor Strange, while also juggling a ton of new issues that have come her way, now that she's both the Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension as well as Earth. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so in our recent talks on Strange, we've been following Clea, with her becoming the Sorcerer Supreme after the death of Dr. Stephen Strange, and in the forefront of her motivations, she's been pursuing a solution on how to get him back, to where at this time, what seems to be the most comparable solution was a spell that she created that would track down the recently resurrected heroes, which is an idea that she came upon not only when Thunderstrike came back, but also when she was confronted by the Harvestmen who had informed her on why Thunderstrike came back, which in itself wasn't a tried and true return of Thunderstrike, but rather the results of a more recent issue that Mistress Death had been dealing with, where the endless dead are being called back to the land of the living, to where hundreds or even thousands of these souls will band together and form a Gestalt entity united behind the assumed identity and cross over into the land of the living. But along with Clea being the new Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, she's made new enemies, which also has brought her into conflict with the Blasphemy Cartel, who's been attacking magical refugees in an attempt to invade the Shrouded Bazaar, which technically is a pocket dimension in New York, but with it being in New York and on Earth, these people fall under the guidelines of her protection as Sorcerer Supreme. But regardless of how harsh Clea sends her message to the Blasphemy Cartel, these guys just keep coming back, which now has given her motivation to investigate them to figure out what it is exactly that they're after. But at this point when we jump back in, Clea's got other urgencies that have taken her attention, which at this point in time is her mother Umar, who has invited herself to the Sanctum Sanctorum to have dinner with her daughter. And we knew leading up to this point that Clea dreaded this dinner reservation that her mother had made for herself, not because Clea's in the presence of another warlord. She grew up in Dormammu's court, so that's nothing to her. But instead, it's really more so Clea dealing with her mother, which Clea would rather not do if she had the option. Because aside from Umar being very powerful and very imposing, she's also Clea's mother. So when Umar says what she wants to say, how she wants to say it, it hits a little different. And we get that from Umar as soon as she walks in, when she tells Clea that she expected something a bit more grandiose as far as the presentation of the Sanctum Sanctorum, rather than coming here and finding it to be Clea's dead husband's musty old home. And it's like, man, she just talking foul. And with her also saying this in front of Wong, he has some choice words that he wants to say in return, but Clea just tells Wong to take Bats for a walk before things really get heated. But from here, as Umar and Clea sit down for dinner, we also find the Blasphemy Cartel has made their way to the Sanctum Sanctorum, as directed by Agent Nunn. But of course, like we'd seen, these guys believe that they're only dealing with Clea. But even with that being the case, they made their way here with every intention of hitting her even harder than they had before. But at the dinner table, within this conversation between Umar and Clea, it's here where we really find the reason why Umar called for this dinner. And really, for the most part, it's because Umar has a misunderstanding of the reason why Clea had become Sorcerer Supreme. And that's mainly because she believes that this is something that Clea had orchestrated and planned for, to take the title of Sorcerer Supreme from Doctor Strange as some sort of play of power, to put Clea in the perfect position to just take over the world. And that's really why Umar called for this dinner, with her telling Clea how proud of her she is, and how she just knows from here Clea's gonna need her advice and her counsel. But while they're having this discussion, just outside, we find that the Blasphemy Cartel, they are back at it again with their enchanted weaponry, to where this time they got a genie and a missile. And with seeing this, it just had me thinking, like, who in their weapons development department just walked in one day and was like, you know what? We need to put a genie in a missile, just in case we run into a moment where we just wish a wizard would. Like, could you imagine? Like, for me, when I see stuff like this, I can't help but think of somebody somewhere going through the time to actually make this a thing, where you would launch a missile and Will Smith comes out. But really with how this is done, it's like a one-off. It's a one hit. This dude just literally rubbed the rocket and let one off. But this is done so that this genie, or this djinn, could break through and catch Clea off guard, so that the Blasphemy Cartel could unleash their real weapon, now that they have a clear pathway to make their attack. And it's here we find that they send in none other than Shadowknight. But again, in a similar way to what we had seen with Thunderstrike, this isn't really and truly the return of Randall Spectre. Not completely, because though this is his actual dead body, taken over by either hundreds or thousands of other ghosts bond together, to where in their case thousands of ghosts is already madness as it is. And then when you add that to a shell of Randall Spectre, who was already mad, and then you just get madness on top of madness. But on top of this legion of ghosts, they also amplify the existing power that Randall already had, which then make his crest more powerful and capable of piercing Umar and Clea's defenses. But for Clea, it's very early on while her and Umar are battling this Shadowknight Revenant, where she realizes that though on the surface, he's comprised of a similar setup to what she had seen with Thunderstrike, but in this case with Shadowknight, he's stronger, he's faster, and he's way more vicious of an opponent. And it's mainly because in either case, there's still a fragment of that person still in there. To where for Thunderstrike, that fragment of Eric Masterson, though he had been driven mad, he was still a hero at his core, which in that case made it like she was battling someone who was trying to hold back to some extent. But in this case with Shadowknight, he was already a psychopathic murderer. So in that case, when you throw more madness on top of it, along with a power buff, then you find yourself fighting someone who is way more dangerous. And for that reason, Clea realizes quickly that she's got to step it up. But also at this point, with it being very clear that this guy was sent by the Blasphemy Cartel, Clea then sends her mother outside to handle them, while she stays here and takes care of Shadowknight. And right away we see Clea go about this by unleashing the demon that the Blasphemy Cartel had used on her back in Strange Issue 1, which at the time was really them giving a Faultine more ammunition to use at a later time. And I like that Jed MacKay has her bring it out now, rather than having it be an idea that just showed up at one point only for us to find that it didn't matter later on. And I always appreciate when we're given those cues in the story. But with Clea doing this, she knows that the demon's not gonna last long. Almost like when you use up your summon in Final Fantasy VII. So in doing this, Clea realizes that she's got to come up with a more permanent solution, and she's got to do it quick. And it's here where we find that she comes up with a solution to exorcise these ghosts from the physical body of Shadowknight. And in the meantime, while she's doing this, her mother Umar is just outside, wasting these nobodies from the Blasphemy Cartel. But at this time for Clea, she expresses that coming up with a new spell on the spot is no easy task. And this is why when people think of great sorcerers and great magicians, that they're usually these old guys with long white beards, because assembling a new spell is not a quick and easy task, it usually takes time. And that's why for Clea, when she does this, she realizes that it's high risk, because mixing magics together that usually don't go together or that haven't been tested together, it could blow up in her face, or worse. But with her doing this, on one hand, I can't help but think that given the circumstance, her coming up with a solution on the spot, it's pretty convenient. But at the same time, a part of my mind is just able to let it slide, because all she's doing is exorcising these souls from this body, which is something that I'd imagine that any Sorcerer Supreme would be able to pull off. But given the circumstance that Clea doesn't really know who is behind this or what spells were precisely used to pull this off, that's the part that kind of gets me. Because in most cases, a sorcerer would have to know what they're unbinding in order to unbind a spell. And again, even if they don't know the spell, the chances of them succeeding in unbinding said spell are way higher if they know who casted the spell to begin with. But again, I find that part of me is able to let it slide because she's faced a version of this before with Thunderstrike, who she had defeated alongside of the Harvestmen, who in addition did give her some information about what's going on here, but also because at its core, this new spell that she came up with, it was really just a more complex unbinding spell to remove this legion of ghosts from the physical body of Randall Spectre. But with her pulling this off, she also hears a voice from a distance ask her, "How did you do that?" And it's here where we find that the Harvestman was not only impressed, but also intrigued on how Clea had pulled this off. Which from here leads to Clea telling the Harvestman that for one, he's late, but also she has a ton of more questions for him about these Revenants as well as their connection to the Blasphemy Cartel, which is something that we'll get into on the next one, which will also lead us into the reveal of getting the identity of who the Harvestman actually is. So with saying that, be careful in the comments if you haven't gotten that far just yet, because I'm sure there's gonna be a ton of people in the comments section of this video spilling the tea on who the Harvestman is before we get to the next one. So with that said, you've been warned. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.